Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Extra Hours, as part of the Office Hours Global network. I don't know if we're calling it network yet, but it basically is. We have a series of shows now, and so this is a night show. I'm reporting from Adelaide, South Australia, where it is Christmas Eve. It's the 24th of December, and one of the things that I enjoy at Christmas time, my mum used to put these sorts of candies. Let's see if we get that. There it is, and that is called a freckle. It's just chocolate with sprinkles on it. Is that what you call them? We call them hundreds and thousands. That's what I don't know how they got their name, but anyway, it's one of the things that I enjoy. Bowls of those around the place is something I enjoy over the holiday period. But even though it is Christmas Eve, we're still assembling a crack squad of production experts from all over the world. Joining me from Australia and actually Adelaide is Carl Asmussen. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Welcome to the future.
Yeah, good. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It's there. It's the rest of the panel that are living in the past, starting with Alex Lindsay. Hello, sir.
I'm enjoying the past. I'm going to enjoy it for a little while longer. We can never really reach your future, but we can dream.
You can dream. Yeah, you got a bit of extra husk in your voice that I'm appreciating, but I'm sure it's actually knocked you out for a few days. Is that right?
I got I haven't had the flu for 20 years, and it was like it was going around my and I was a little bit, I made it a little brazen. My son got sick, and then my daughter got sick, and my wife got sick, and I was like, I don't really get the flu. It doesn't really happen to me because it just hasn't for so long. And this sequence has happened before, and I get like, I think I get the flu, but I just don't feel it. Like it's just like a little bit of a sore throat, and then it's gone. And this year I did not have that experience, and so it was a unique couple days where I had to suddenly sleep for 2 days, and now I'm better. I mean I'm about 70%, 80%. But my nose is still filled, and I'm enjoying the neti pot. It's a good way to sort
Nice.
things out. Right before the show, I probably too little TMI there, but that's how in radio there were two things that we use exclusively for radio when I was on radio, was that neti pots and wasabi. I don't have any wasabi in the house, but we would, right before I went on air, I'd be like, you would just take a huge chunk of wasabi and bite down on it, and you'd be like, "Brrr," and then you'd come up and go, XVX, here, right here is the Depeche Mode coming up, is not, like, and you would just be like, do it, and then you get off, you'd be like, and because you can't, the show must go on, so you had to figure
Good
out, and
thing.
then sore throats were just lemon juice and keep moving.
Good thing there was no camera on you
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that
yeah.
point. Yeah.
I did the morning show, so I came in like some like beach shorts and a t-shirt that I oftentimes woke up in, and you just kind of wander in and start doing the morning show, because it was, I had to get there at 3:30 in the morning, so it was because you had to prep for 2 hours, and then of course I was the straight guy, and then the funny guy came in. He would come in like 15 minutes before, because he doesn't have to know anything. He just
No,
reacts to everything. So
he just cracks gags while you
he's
actually
funny.
try to run the
He
show.
gets he gets
Yeah.
he gets paid because he's funny. So
Fair
that's
enough.
what it was. Yeah.
Well, and you're in California there. You can't complain too much about the cold. But
Yeah.
someone who can is Guy up in Seattle. You've got some cold winds blowing through you at the moment, Guy.
Yeah, it's a little cooler here than it is down there. Underneath all these lights, so it's actually hot. I had to crack the window all the way open. So, uh, yeah,
You've
but
got
I
air
do go for a
conditioning
run in
all.
the morning, and it's pretty nippy out there. I have to put on a face mask, warm gloves, got my wool cap, and I'm out there running at 5 in the morning.
Nice.
Talk about TMI. There you go. That's my recipe for not getting sick.
Think about Guy running in the morning. And so to complete our panel, we have David Paskin. I can't. Do you know what is awesome about office hours? So I can't even remember what part of the country you're in, David.
I'm in sunny Florida with the chestnuts roasting by the open
There you
fire,
go.
and that's the extent of my Christmas knowledge right there. What I just did, the chestnuts and the
That's
fire.
a, I feel like we've done well. We're just missing someone from the south of America. I think we've got the other corners covered. It seems.
I know, Grant, Florida isn't as south as it
Yeah, we're
can
kind
go.
of south.
You can't go a lot
Well,
more
fair
south
enough.
than Florida.
Fair enough. I just think of it as the east, right? But yeah, point taken. All right. So there's a couple of conversations I want to have because currently we have no questions, which is fine. I'm sure there's a couple of conversations that we want to have that will spark some questions. One of those is the ongoing discussion about the NAB coverage. And it seems like every time we talk about what we did this year, it gets into lots of dissecting it and trying to work out what was great, what worked really well, what didn't work so well, and then ultimately what would we do next year. And so I'm interested to pick up that conversation because it's progressing to a place that it hasn't before, I think, because it's getting closer to where we need to lock down exactly what we're doing. So we'll come to that in a moment. The other thing that I want to look at tonight is the idea that we, in office hours, my observation is that most people that get connected to our community, there's a common denominator, I think, between everyone, and that is that they have some connection to home studio or home meeting setup. The idea that people could be working in any industry, but we all come about when we think about our internet connection, our audio that we're doing on our online meetings, our lighting, our video, and our set, kind of our environment that we're in. So I'm interested to look at those 5 areas quickly to think about what it was that we saw this year, and what we have noticed in office hours, which I've noticed a few things in those areas, and then what we think this next year might bring in those areas that might change. So there's something to think about. But let's hit the NAB coverage first. One of the things that you were talking about, Alex, briefly is the idea of booth or not to booth. And so there's that discussion. What I want to throw at you is that one idea you're saying is having, maybe 2 or 3 wireless setups that are going around the environment. What I keep thinking about, though, is that there is only one stream, and it probably makes sense that we only manage one stream that's going back to the panel. Therefore, is it not possible that we could have potentially multiple teams or a couple of teams that are using one setup, one wireless setup, so that we're going out to the field, we have one great wireless setup and they're running around, we have a Zoom panel and kind of the anchoring happens on Zoom, and then you can swap the on-site team out with the same physical setup and just have one.
It's just an efficiency thing. So it's not that you can't do it. It's that there's a certain amount of setup and everything else that happens in between. If you have multiple, like, I've been covering these events in one shape or another for a while, 25 years now. And the big thing is having multiple setups just means that you're jumping from one thing to the next, and what happens is if one, this is the other thing, is if one has a problem, you immediately go to the other one. If one gets held up, if you only have one, it's kind of like having one register and a bunch of people that you want to check out, and one person gets real slow, it backs up everything, right? And so you have more control over your time. So a lot of times, I think about things, and because I came out of radio, I have a tendency to think, lost my pen. I tend to think about, oh, here it is. So I tend to always think about time circles, so I think about, if I'm going to have, we're going to come off the top of the hour and we're going to talk to someone here. And then we're going to have another one that we're going to talk to someone here. And then we want another one that's talking to someone here. So these are our main things, right? And then we may have, other things that are happening. Oops, that's not a good color. We have other things that are happening in here that might be on the panel, right? But we have these 3 things. Now, we can make that denser. This is about as best we can do with one system, but we can start making that denser if we start to go from, it's not that we don't want to go to the panel. The panel can hold a lot, but we still need a couple minutes to set up. I find that it's a better show if, you know, we always say that content is easy to make or easy to watch, you know, and so, but
Yeah.
you rarely get both. And so by having 2 teams or potentially 3 teams, the idea is that we have, so the thing I've been thinking about is 2 wireless systems that we had, these 2-way wireless systems and 1 live view system. Because there's places we can't get to with the wireless system. So the idea is the live view is the I can go anywhere system. And then we have, which is we use the, but we found that to be fairly successful. The only thing we're swapping out from last year, that what I'm suggesting we swap out, is that I don't think we need the desk. So the desk was great because it got to show off this great screen with Unreal Engine and Zoom, and you know, that worked well. Looking at the actual segments, I'm not sure if they had the same energy that they would have had just standing in the, you know, in the middle of you know, in front of their booth, or just in the middle of something with energy, people going around and so on and so forth. And so I guess what I would say is that by having 3 places to go, it means that if something goes wrong with something, or something takes a little longer, it gives us time to set up, it gives us time to get ready, it gives us time to kind of figure everything out. Each booth has a, you know, a certain, you know, you're talking to everyone. Okay, I'm going to go here, here, here. I'm looking at the booth. Like, I'm going to go into this booth. Like when I do these coverages, I need time to walk through the booth. I mean, this is how I do it anyway, is I walk through the booth with the person that I'm going to do the interview with, and look at stuff that they're going to show me. And then we talk about where, like we'd be talking about, like, where's the best place for the camera? And we're figuring that stuff out. And then, so then when we throw to us, I kind of know where we're all going to go. And the camera operator also has already blocked it. And, you know, we kind of know what we're doing. That takes a little bit of time. And so we can spend, I think that what people want to see in an expo is as many booths as possible with some glue in between from the panel, creating context for those things, like being able to come out of each hit with the panel talking for a couple minutes. But we need more. By having multiple systems, it takes a lot of pressure. It also takes a lot of pressure off of each group. So if I'm the camera team, you really kind of want to keep the same camera team, but what you don't want to do is work them for a straight hour. So you want to have them have their thing, and maybe they have a 10-minute hit every 30 minutes, you know, and that gives them time. They can rest, they can do what they need to do, they can get things figured out, they can tweak things that aren't working. And so with a lot of the coverage that I've done over the last 25 years, we just find that multiple teams that are throwing things back and forth to each other. And, you know, in the past, I realized that the booth idea and having a table at the booth was really something that I brought from the past, not from the future, in the sense that I didn't have a panel before that was online. And I realized when I designed it, we always have a booth somewhere because I always that's our home base. But I realized the panel's the home base. Like, I don't need that system to do that. That was always our home base.
There was something about that, though, that the difference was that we brought the people to the panel. So we brought the booth to the panel, and the panel was still online. But here's the thing: is that I think the biggest overarching thing is, what is the best way for someone to experience these expos from home? I still think that watching you and watching Leo walk around a floor was so magnetic. Like, like randomly walking from one thing to do. And Guy, you did a great job of that as well, right? Just be the person that we would be if we were on site, where we are literally walking from one thing to another. Some booths you just went and pushed some buttons on some things and you didn't talk to anyone. And the next one, you spoke to someone, had a bunch of, you know, stuff that went on. So I still think that is more akin to the experience that you have when you're on site versus coverage of the event in a more broadcast style.
Well, I don't know if it's broadcast
really
style, though.
hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess for me, I think that if we tie that in, like, so for instance, if I was there, I get that the wandering around is a thing, but I think that there's an incredible amount of power as we refine that, of having the experts. Like, we're going to talk about audio for the next hour, right? And we stack the panel with 6 experts. And then we go from place to place to place, and that person, and I have to admit that it was, for me, the big moment was with Lindsay. I've said this before, Lindsay Optics, which was the second hit we did. and watching them, watching Lindsay, the folks at Lindsay Optics, like holding stuff up. And I didn't know anything about Lindsay Optics. I mean, we picked them because they had my name, you know, like I had literally, there was no other good reason. We happened to be we went to the lighting, we went to light pad. We went to them before because we had used them at Cinegear and I knew that they were good. Like I knew that I can't think of his name right now, but I knew he would knock it out of the park. And so let's start there. And then I just looked over like, what's next? And I saw, oh, there's my name. Slight misspelling, but otherwise my name, right? And so anyway, the English version. Anyway, so I was like close enough, and I was like, let's go over there and just see how this works when I just put it in a random situation. And we had someone, you know, looking up at the stuff and showing us the pieces. And there was, I think that the panel, I have to admit that after I saw the video and after I went back and watched it, the idea of this, I find it grating.
Yeah, this is the traditional what everybody else is going to be doing.
And I can't watch that anymore. Like I literally, it broke me. And now what I'd rather do is get to a point now that we figured out how to do it, you know, there's part of me that would rather go to these events remotely. So be with you, Grant, and with Carl and David and Guy and somebody's got to be on the ground, but have a team that's going there and us guiding through and asking the questions through Zoom to the folks that are there. And I think that it doesn't have the same wandering, but you're still having us ask questions, because I think that the value, in my opinion, and you know, I'm open to lots of things, but the value, in my opinion, is that what you want to hear, what I like to do is walk around with people that are smarter than me about something and listen to them talk, because they're asking questions that I would never think of, right? And that's how I learn. And so I think that's the important piece of that puzzle. And I think that that makes it, and also it makes it infinitely more scalable over time, because it means that all of us can go to many of these events at the same, you know, many of these events at the same, like I can go to one every week if I was just doing it remotely, you know, like I can't fly to each one of these. So if we figure out a way to have this camera system be relatively easy to put together, the new version is so much easier to put together. It takes minutes to put it together. Just printing a couple things that tied it all together made it much simpler. The being able to send this kit to somebody and say, we as the experts are all going to be part of that, you know, part of the conversation. And what it does is it also takes the people that are at the expo, it draws their eye line straight into the camera, right? So they're talking straight to the viewer. And and now there's this whole thing about, if I'm showing somebody something, the camera's always trying to get over there looking at it, where I'm just showing it to the camera. Like, I'm just like, here it is. This is what it is. And I think that that's a really valuable view that has never been done before that last NAB. And I think that is the thing that I'm the most, I guess I felt like that was the most compelling thing that I had seen in Expo coverage in 25 years. So here's this was.
Yeah. What was his name? I can't quite see his name badge.
He's such a great guy too. And I'm really feel like I'm doing him dirty by not having it. I just can't get, it's too,
and you did a little bit of this.
That's all I'm saying.
This is what it was like, right?
Intro.
Yeah.
And then I got out of the way. But then I learned to not do that anymore. Like, it was like, I didn't like that part. Like I felt like I'd rather just have it, you know, get on with it.
And then it cut to this and it worked great.
So I started with introductions, but very quickly learned that we didn't need to do that. That was part of us learning.
Can I ask a question? So you and Alex, at one point I remember you talking about the future of this type of event. But now that I'm listening to you speak, I'm wondering, why do all of these service providers and companies need to come together in one big space? Why can't they just?
Because they're not willing to. I'll tell you why. Because they're not willing to invest in their own studio, like that. You know, like it is literally that they'll put $1 million into the studio that is in. They'll put $1 million into the studio that or into the booth to be there, but they won't spend $50,000 or $100,000 on a permanent studio in their office. Sound Devices tried to do that. They had they had sound can't remember what it was, but they tried to do a sound conference during COVID, and John was totally set up, and other people and the sound devices folks were totally set up. But Sony and all these other people, it was all half done, and like little webcams and bad audio, and like so that's the problem. And this and the to us, what's interesting is the value to the conference is the expos pays for the conference, right? And so and it brings all those people together. To us, I agree with you that someday we could just do this remotely. That's what our second hour. But the other thing is like, why not just have them as a special that we just bring them on when we're good and ready? Like, we don't need to do it all at one time either. So we could just be doing these all the time from their studio if they did it. But you can see even with our second hours from last year, about half the folks didn't really heavily invest in how they look and sound. But so this is something that we can take you to. And the advantage for us as broadcasters is that everyone's every 10 feet, there's a new person to talk to. The advantage that we bring to the expo is we add value to the expo, which is adding value to the conference. So if we get really good at this and this becomes part of a package, or if other people get good at it, and this becomes the normal way of doing it, being at the expo, we become a multiplier to the value of having an expo space, is because if you get that expo space, there's, and eventually you get to a point where if we're covering, like we only did it for a couple hours at a time. Imagine us starting when the expo opens and closing when the expo closes, and then potentially eventually having multiple teams and multiple channels where you're, like you have just the audio folks are just all day, every day is all audio, and then some video and some whatever, that becomes like we're covering everything that you could possibly want to see in a conference. I mean, that's 5 years from now if we're lucky. But the point is that I think that no one's ever, you see almost no live coming out of any of these conferences because it's hard. The internet's expensive. What we did, I mean, that was more than a $100,000 rig that we used. When like that's how much it costs to run that rig, and so that's why no one does that, and so, but I think that we can, and most people who do VOD can't do live. And we take a lot of pressure off the people on the ground because we have 6 people up there that can take turns. It's so much less stress for a panel than it is for a person. Even if I go up there and I've done this for a long time and I'm pretty good at it, but it's so much, I think it's still a better conversation when I have 6 people who really know what they want to ask, and they get time to think, they get time to look at a couple things, research things while the other people are talking. They get to listen to the other person talking and reacting. We get questions from the viewing audience that's even adding more to what that is. So that, I think that the potential is a much higher value conversation. And again, I think we only saw the very seeds of that. But as we refine that experience, I think it goes way up as far as that.
Well, I think when we dissect what worked well, what we're getting better and better at, I think the panel side of it, I think we're getting to be working quite well, right? Like,
we know how to do panels. It turns out if you do it every day, people get good at it. It's
get better at it. No, but there is something different about it, right? When we do have a person, which is kind of like a second hour. But when we have a person that we're talking to, so you can see it here. This is still the Lindsay Optics guys, and he's looking at us, right? Even though it's like his son or his offside or whatever was holding the mic, he's talking to us on the panel, and we're asking the questions.
There was some point where he picked stuff up directly to show.
Yes, it was just talking here. It was just before, which was really cool. That was this. It was like,
this is when I went,
this is
like
cool.
When you're sitting there and they're showing it to you. I mean, one of the things I'd like to refine is that, obviously we're using a handheld mic because that's the easiest to do it, but with more time, and if we had multiple crews, what we would do is most likely give him, take the moment to give him a headset.
Yeah.
Or you have an extra person and you do a shotgun mic. I mean, really cool. Just you could boom the whole thing and
or you clip a Rode Wireless Go or something too. I mean, the audio from those is terrible.
It's a pretty contested environment. Even the Electrosonics get hits every once in a while. So you might have trouble with that. But yeah. So I think
if we've got the panel side of it, I think is on the right track. I just think that we still haven't quite worked out what is the ideal, because the issue that I have when we go to multiples, and I get your point about going from 1 to 2 and having something where one cuts off or whatever, you've got another one to cut to is great. And so I see that. But inevitably what happens is that second team has someone standing by that they're standing at a booth with, and now we're on a time pressure. And that's what we don't need. And I totally get the circle and thinking of all the segments, but I think it's an old way of doing it. Like it's a broadcast model of doing it, right?
It's just
because what we saw is when we could. The problem we had also. Let me just finish this thought, and I want to hear what you have to say. One time we had a particular segment where we said we've got 15 minutes with this booth. We were done in 30 seconds to a minute. The person gave us a couple of things about their product. They weren't all that dynamic, and we were like, we would just move on. But somehow we had our next hit coming from another one that they were standing by with, but we kind of had this time slot that we just had to fill.
Well, and I think that number one is that I think that we should just let them go. Like if we got done in 5 minutes, just go back to the panel and talk. And then the other thing is that also means that the other side knows when to pick up speed. It's just that I can say from being on the ground, if one team is trying to do all of it, it gets exhausting, and then we end up with bad content.
That's fair enough.
And so this is more of a energy management process of the team. I mean, it's a heavy rig. I mean, one thing that we would probably add, this was a shoulder rig, and some of the operators could handle it and some of them couldn't, and so I think that the shoulder rigs are heavy, and you really have to be pretty wide shoulders to make it work, and I've done it for many hours, but most people that have been able to do it for long hours are typically over 250 pounds with big wide shoulders and big, and like they just this isn't the weight isn't that much in comparison to the rest of their body. And so that that's a challenge. I think in this next one we'd probably use a monopod so they can just set it down and move around a little bit, grab it if they need to, move back and forth. Brent By does that really well. Like he gets a monopod, he'll just grab that camera and go up with it and down, and he's really exceptional at that. And so Brent is a person that I'd love to bring on to do it as well, to mix into what we're doing. But the point is that I think a monopod will make it easier, but it is a grueling. And what happens is especially when you're on that camera, when the camera operator starts to get tired, you start to see it. Like it's not like they'll start to shake, and I know that. And then on the other side of that, Guy has the IV and he's moved that around, and that's been successful. I think that gives us more endurance, and that might be the other wireless system, right? So you could have the handheld wireless, you could have the IV, and then you have the live view or something like that. Could be another option where you're, because that, I think Guys has more endurance and you get to wander around through that process. I don't think it's as dynamic as the handheld shot is. I think that there's just something that isn't quite as focused about it, just because it's not built to be roaming around on a kit. So we're kind of using it for something it's not as designed for. But I think that it is and I think that using all of these, like having the IV, having the handheld, having the live view, because the live view is still kind of the old fashioned. We're going to talk back and forth, right? So I think having all three of them might make sense. But I do think the biggest thing we find with live, especially in this kind of environment, though, is to give people reset times. So giving people little segments. I know it's a traditional broadcast way to approach things, but it's there. In some cases, broadcast has a reason for that.
But we can still do that with one. We can still do that with one on site.
Yeah, it's just
right?
that
we have the
longer. I know, but the longer we sit in the panel doesn't. I mean, we want to have the panel fill when it needs to, but sometimes we need 15 minutes, like to fix something. And I think that what I think it felt like anytime we had a long panel discussion, what I'm left is, we can have that discussion anytime. Why aren't we at the booth? Like we want to be doing booth to booth to booth as densely as we can, I think, because this is our moment to do that. And so only having one kit greatly reduces the number of booths we'll see, in a given day. You know,
So,
like
yeah,
it's because
this
you
is
just
what I
wear
was
out the
bringing up
teams.
before we went live. This is what I was talking about, having a second camera and like the makeup of that second camera. So Alex has his camera, and like if he can get prisms or live views, that's really good. But I'm thinking something that we could probably own rather than borrow or get sponsored to do. So this is what I was talking about just before we went live today. Was Blackmagic Broadcast G2 would be nice. It doesn't have to have this lens. This lens, you can buy the kit with this lens. It can have an EF lens on the front if you want. But essentially, the V-mount battery powers everything you see here. You can put L series batteries on the back of the monitor. But essentially, the V-mount battery will power the streaming bridge and power the camera. And it can also power the monitor if you want to, but as I said, then essentially the signal from SRT, let's say, SRT signal from the camera will go into the Nighthawk, which is a little internet thing on the left here, 5G, 4G. That goes into a TS9 antenna, that's what this is. This will actually be screwed on top of the camera into a quarter 20. So this is actually for boats, for marine. It's omnidirectional. It increases your increases your signal strength, or your signal noise ratio. Really, it's not strength, it's actually signal noise ratio by about 13 dB. So essentially, the signal will go out back to base. So that's the signal from the floor, and then from base, so from the Zoom, we can come back in via the streaming bridge. So essentially, we just need an A10 Mini bringing the Zoom participant into the streaming bridge, and the streaming bridge is being powered by the V-mount battery, and it's sending its signal into the little monitor on the front. And then the little monitor on the front has audio out, so we can have that plugged into any headset system, or we're going to get audio out a million ways. So this is a very lightweight system we can use, and this is something we could actually probably afford to actually own as office hours.
I mean,
some contributing off sales.
Yeah, and we haven't had any trouble, especially at NAB. We haven't had any trouble getting loaners, I have to admit. Like NAB is the easiest one for us to get because everybody is selling the equipment. Like all we have to do is talk about the fact that we're using it. But the challenge with that, by the way, is that if you're not bonding a lot of cell coverage, the cell coverage in Vegas is just a nightmare.
Yeah. So the cell coverage is a single cell coverage. That's where the marine antenna comes in.
Nothing works. I'm just telling you, nothing works in Vegas like that. Like it, you.
So
the
only thing would be out of Peplink. The only thing I'd switch it out for the Nighthawk out for a Peplink, and that's the only thing. Peplink can run off a V-mount as well. So. And
the problem with the Peplink, I don't mean to cut, but like we've done some of these things, and so I'll just tell you our experience so far. The Peplink, the problem is that in the United States, licensing individual SIMs is a nightmare. If you're trying to do it if you're not buying up the SIMs for a year at a time or 2 years at a time, getting them for a month, it is arm and leg costs, and then they put heavy clamps on your bandwidth. If Verizon sees you using 3 modems at the same time from a Peplink, they immediately cripple them. Like it's just like, and so. The reason we use live views is because when people say, "Oh, you can just put your own little modems in," we're like, "Yeah, okay." But if I get an LU800, live view has sorted out all those contracts and made all that stuff work, and everybody knows what's happening, and it all just works, right? And so that's why I don't tend to do anything where I have to use my own modems, and that's just because we've tried. Over the last 20 years, we've definitely tried to not use live views just because they were expensive at the time. Live view's been kind enough to lend us one now, so we have one that we can use. And I rented 2 live views, at least 2 live views for 5 years, and with an extender. So we use them all the time because we just learn. And in NAB, nothing will work for very long with one modem or your own modems. The live view will work everywhere at NAB except the concrete thoroughfare in the center of Central Hall. Like it whatever reason, there's enough rebar there that it literally is just dark. Like it's Panasonic and Canon, and it just goes and it's gone. And so when we covered Panasonic, we supported Panasonic's booth one time, and we had to run fiber to every 2 runs of fiber to every hit location to make sure that worked.
Yeah, and we had a chance to actually, somebody showed me a screen scrape of my activity at one of the Infocom events. And it was interesting to go back because I did take some hits, and we're talking about 5 megabits on a 4 modem setup. So this is the Mr. Net equivalent. It's a Disaster Group's modem, and 5 megabits, that's like sipping. That's like nothing, because remember, it's a Zoom contribution. So this is the Ivy on the cart with a MacBook Air that is running Zoom, and then that down below those antennas, there's 4 antennas, and it's just Ethernet going right into that. So that router is like a Peplink. It's essentially bonding up in AWS. And even with that setup, I was still taking hits. So the smoothest I've seen has been the live view, because there is an efficient codec going on there. So there's more to this than just bonding. There's the efficiency of the codec. But I mean, 5 megabit for Zoom is already
Well,
dang low, and it'll throttle down to 720. Yeah.
And the other thing is that I feel like, I mean, where I'm trying to go with the coverage is to take it to another level from a quality perspective too. So the live view is also delivering 20 megs a second HEVC, you know, out. Yeah. So we were able to do, I mean, 4K, 60 frames a second, 5.1. We did, you know, 2 years ago, we did 5.1, 60 frames a second, 4K. And that's, to me, that's the reason that we're doing all this work right now with office hours in the morning, is to get ready to cover the events at that level, you know. And again, those are places that we had to, in this last NAB, we had to retreat, and it was mostly because I didn't give the back end team enough time to get all the ducks in a row to do that, and we didn't have the right hardware. I didn't give them enough time. It was all my fault, you know, that we had to retreat back. And so this time, that's why one of the reasons we got rid of second hours for now, is so that we can just evolve as fast as we need to, so that when we're pretty close, we had 60 frames a second at SDR going last week. We had HDR before that. Now we got to get all of them together, but we're very close to 4K, 4K HDR 60 frames a second. And then we just have to add the 5.1, and we may be potentially weeks away from having it all kind of working. And it's all, you know, there's little glitches here and there as we figure it out, but that's fine, because we just said, okay, we're going to do that until we get it working. But by NAB, this should be what we call Tuesday. You know, like, it's not like there's nothing to it, and we can just add the contributions into it without any lift at all. And that's the goal, is that the pipeline is just built to do 4K, 60 frames a second, HDR 5.1. And then we do it. And because it does get a lot of people's attention, like, it is, like, you know, when we did that 1 hour where we wandered around, I mean, my messages just blew up. Like, what are you guys doing over there? Like, you know, like, it was just, you know, it was like, and people are watching it in their homes and telling me, like, you know, reading it out, like, this looks and sounds amazing. And, you know, and we wanted to get back to that. We didn't get back to it on this last one, but I think the next one, we're in the potential to be able to take the magic that we had with last year and merge it with the magic that we had the year before, and try to get something that, and again, I think that that's going to be the, and again, the problem that we'll have with the bridge or anything else is that it'll be a huge shift down from that quality. And the Prism and the Rangers specifically give us that. There's one challenge of getting, the Rangers are still stereo, so we have to embed the surround on the other end of that wireless transmission, which is something I got to think through. But that's the, you know, that's the, but it's pretty, we're getting pretty close, you know. And again, it's something that you want to kind of, I don't know, I always want to push people's imagination of what this can look like, because the idea is that, you know, we're ignoring, every time we do this event, we're not streaming from the expo, we're ignoring the 5 nines, you know, the 99.999% of the people that will never come to that event. In any place in the world, no matter how big the event is, 99.999% of the world will never be there. And that's like, and how do we give them that front row that is like, and you know, with this kind of interactive view that we have in HDR, hearing it all around you, for the people who can do that, even on their phones or on their iPads, it's an entirely, you know, it's this magic, you know, obviously we want to create this magical experience that they have of being there, that they want to go to it. And I think that adds a lot of value to the expos. If it becomes something that we can do every time without a lot of work, it becomes something that I think a lot of expos would love to have as a service. So it was interesting. We were talking to some folks, and they were thinking about all these other ways to use that camera system. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's like, oh, you know, there's booths might want, you know, especially the smaller booths might want to do a Q&A only with their investors, or only with this, or only with that, you know, like, or just with the press, or just, and as soon as and that's when you talk to other people, that they suddenly think of all these other ways to use your product. And I realized, oh, this could be really interesting. So anyway, so we're, you know, that's, you know, but what makes it work, I guess I would say that, you know, where a lot of people try to figure out why Apple cleans everybody's clock all the time, you know, like on stuff, like they'll start after everybody else and then just take the market from them. you know, and it's because people don't think that that last little bit is important, but Apple does, you know, like that last little like smooth edge looks pretty, surprise and delight, you know, doing a lot of things that you didn't need to do. And that's, you know, and the people, and there's a lot of people that, you know, they don't even know why they're into that, but they are. And so a lot of people think that good enough is good enough. And oftentimes good enough is good enough until someone does much better. You know, it's, you know, good enough, it's kind of like a pair. Good enough is kind of like having a pair of tens. Like, you know, it's, you could win a lot of hands with that. But if someone comes in with a full house, you're done. You know, and Apple just keeps on showing up with full houses. You know, it's not, they're not showing up with royal flushes, but it's a pretty solid hand. You know, like, you know, and everybody else keeps on thinking, well, I can win with three of a kind or a pair. And so I think that there's always an opportunity to try to bring a full house in, you know, to make that happen. And I think that people keep on not understanding why Apple, you know, like Apple has built this headset that no one's bought, you know, evidently that's what I hear. No one's bought the headset, but it's already changed all the interfaces. Like if you look at how all the interfaces are going for virtual, everybody's changing because Apple set the pace, you know.
Well, I remember their market cap going to $1 trillion, like the first one to $1 trillion, where everyone was amazed by it. Yeah. And now it's 3.86. It's nearly at $4 trillion market cap.
Well, and literally their only competition is antitrust, and which I predicted 5 years ago. Like it was, you know, antitrust is going to be the only problem they have because no one else is executing. Like no one else executes at, you know, they think, oh, we don't need that one little ingredient. It's like, because it's not very much. Well, yeast is not very much either, but bread is not the same without it. You know, like, you know, and so the you know, like it, and so people keep on not at, they're like, oh, that's good enough. We're in the ballpark. Let's just, you know, like that's the whole, like, throw it up against the wall and see what happens. And they can't figure out why they keep losing, you know, because they show what they did is they opened the door and you can see where the garden is. Apple sees where the garden is and Apple goes, okay, well, and then they think about it for a little while and they just walk in and adult it.
All right, we've got a comment and a question about NAB, and then we'll move on. But do you see the comment there in the chat, Guy? Do you see that?
I don't see the comment. I'm looking up at the
do the question.
So
do the question.
Yeah, Kenny Hafton, Greenville, Illinois, asks, regarding NAB, if multiple wireless segments were utilized, are you regulated to only one hall at a time? Does the tech allow for spanning halls?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out. Like, so there, you know, it's just a matter of where we can get transmitters and network, you know, so it is something we have to figure out pretty soon, but it's not out of the possibility that we could find a way to span halls. What we were stuck with one hall, this last one, which we picked the hall that we wanted. Like we knew that Central Hall has most of the eye candy. And there really wasn't that much to see. That there wasn't, when I walked through it, there weren't that many things to shoot because the South Hall is mostly software. The North Hall is mostly like big industry. And so I knew that there wasn't a lot. I knew where to shoot, you know, and Central Hall is where all the eye candy is. If anything, we just wanted to get more coverage in Central Hall. And that's why we want to get ahead of it so we can ask for a higher antenna position. That was the thing that kind of limited us more than anything else, is that there was certain dark areas. We got pretty far. I mean, those Vislinks, especially when they came and tuned them, we were having a little trouble. And the Vislink guys came over and showed us like how it's actually done. And suddenly we had a lot more range, you know. And so so the Vislinks are pretty good, but it's a very contested environment. You know, I mean, there's LED walls, and I can't believe that we got any coverage, you know, to be honest. I mean, I was like, well, we'll see how this goes. And Vislink seems very optimistic, and, you know, and it was amazing, like how far we got. So, and if we had been, there was one place that was empty, that the booth was empty. And if we had been there, we would have covered the whole space. You know, like it was right at the top of that center, that part I tell you that there was an empty square. And I took a picture of it and sent to NAB. I was like, I want that square. And they said, you could have it because no one wants that square. But we're not going to be in Central Hall next year. So.
Guy, did you have thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I'm curious. We've been able to span halls with the live view, and then, you know, with something like the Ivy Cart using cellular and same technology essentially. But What about, and I've brought this up in the past, there was just a sale on Ubiquity air fibers. Those things are 12-kilometer range, and they were $250 on
It's just like, do we have line
halls.
of sight between the halls?
Line of
Yeah,
sight.
so
You know,
that's
like,
the thing, is you have to point them. So you would
Yeah.
have to be up high and having somebody point them because they are line of sight. So, I mean, if you get this year as a, LiDAR the place, figure out for the next year, where could we,
Right.
like, so you found the Central Hall sweet spot. Now we need to figure out what's
And we'll be in the North
2026 look
Hall.
like.
Yeah, the North Hall is going to be the next, we would be in the North Hall most likely. That's the one that's the one we want to be in. I mean, part of it is that, and I think we've gotten close. What I find is that you take what you can do well. Like I tend to keep my elbows in. I mean, it's a lot of work. Like that, the last year was probably not my elbows in, but I tend to keep my elbows in and like do what you can do really, really well and just do that part. Because what happens is people see it, they get excited about it, and then you get more partners. You know, the reason that Teradek is letting us, play with their hardware for so long is because they saw NAB. And they saw what we could do with Vislink and with so that's that's the and so what we do is you kind of build from one success to the other. I'd like to build faster by going to more of these events. So we're not doing it 1 year at a time, but every 2 months at a time. We can iterate faster. But I think that it's, I'm not trying to boil the ocean on each show. It's like, hey, no one's ever done this before. Let's figure it out. If we get to the North Hall and we had 2 systems and a live view still going from hall to hall to hall and 2 wireless systems, and there was still a lot of the Central Hall you never saw because we ran out of time, right? So there's still room to grow in one hall, and then the live views covering the other halls. If we just crush that and just make it a great experience, then the next year is a lot more. And to be honest, I think October would be easier to cover. The New York one's easier to cover because it's only one hall. Like you do one day in NAB and one day in AES, and you have some great coverage. And they're all single halls. So the one I don't know how to solve, by the way, is IBC. Oh my gosh, the RAI is just a disaster. Like it's just like whoever designed that is just nuts. Like it's just nuts. I understand. They're not nuts. The RAI is built for lots of small events. So every space has its own space. And that means that you can have 6 conventions going on at the same time. That's what the RAI is designed for. And IBC uses it for something it's not designed for. With let's use the whole space at one time. And that just makes it really a headache. I can't ever remember where I'm at. Like I'm always lost. Like I don't know how to get back to this hall, so.
Kami makes a good point about Blackmagic as one being in the South Hall. And we did walk through that a little bit. But I think the point about Blackmagic is a perfect example of a company that we would just love to have on for second hours. If we can get the right person to be able to talk to, that is a far better experience, I think, than just walking around their big, albeit a big booth. But because you're just kind of looking at the gear, sometimes you can't see the back of it. I don't know that there's a lot of value.
It's funny
in walking around the Blackmagic booth.
I have the same experience. I go to the Blackmagic booth and I love walking around and talking to people. And I know a lot of people that work at Blackmagic, so it's fun to talk to people. And I go up to the product manager because I know who the product manager is and talk to them about what's actually happening and everything else. And that's really fun. But I don't find it to be very photo friendly in the sense that everything's in glass boxes and there's a lot of stuff that's all it's very refined, but there's also just a lot of flow. There's I mean, when you actually do the math, there's like 200 or 300 people in that booth at any given time. And it's just hard to move around. And I also feel like they're going to get plenty of coverage. Like I don't feel the need to go to the Blackmagic booth as much. I don't feel the need to go to the Sony booth. The Sony booth has other problems. The Sony booth is really dark. So it's been dark since the first time that I went to NAB in like 1994. The Sony booth has always been like this.
But this is where we serve the audience by giving them what they want. This is where polling them or asking them in real time and saying, hey, where do you guys want to go? And I didn't really want to go into the Blackmagic booth at Infocom, but people in the audience said, go in there. And I went in there and immediately recognized somebody. They recognized me and they started showing us inside scoop beta stuff that was just like, wow, like stack, that they would not have put out. to just anybody. So Brody's comments mentioned something about having a host that knows people, and not to toot my own horn, but it certainly does help if you have a relationship. You could go in there and you're not just, another YouTuber going in for an interview.
Well,
if you have knowledge of 2110 or the NMOS and things like that, then they want to talk to you more because they know what you're talking about.
I agree. And I do think though that if we're able to do something that is outlandish and really, really good in the areas that we're able to get to, I also think that more people will, more people want to talk to us. Even after the last one, we had lots of people that were asking hey, when are you coming to all week I was getting pinged by, when are you coming to our booth, and when are you coming here, and how are you going to cover this? And they could see it. And again, it already looks so different than what everybody else is doing. It's just a matter of people being able to see it and being able to put together a reel. And a lot of it is there's, to your point of process and progress and all the other things that are there's a lot of process that we haven't started doing yet, because I'm just usually feeling like it's lucky that it's working. But there's this logistics that happens when I do other ones, when I'm getting paid to do this. We have this for 2 months. We're reaching out to all the manufacturers. We're reaching out to all of their PR teams. We're reaching out to everyone else, letting them know that we're coming. And we did some of that for NAB, but not nearly as much as I would do on a paid gig when I've got a big, it was just it's just, there's a huge lift to make sure that. Now that also gets into what Grant was talking about. We schedule a lot of slots. That's a very old fashioned way to do things, but you end up scheduling a bunch of slots so that everything's kind of very tightly wound. And again, that's hard to do with one kit. That's where if you start scheduling slots relatively tightly, because you really want to talk, you want to have somebody available at the booth. If you start tightening that up, and a lot of there was a lot of them that we just kind of were very opportunistic with that live system. We scheduled the live view and we scheduled the booth, but we didn't schedule the live one was scheduled a little, but it was usually from an hour ago, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the controlled chaos, when we do let you wander down and just see what happens. The Dr. NDI hit where we just stumbled into Dr. NDI. And I mean, it was the dopamine hit for the audience where everybody was just like, okay, what's going to happen? Oh man, we're getting inside scoop. Oh, this is a great, topic to be on because it's relevant and it's somebody that we know, it's been on the show.
Right.
And it was just off the cuff, not so structured, because it just feels dry. Like the IBC stuff, I mean, great team out there. It was just like broadcast. It was just like the NAB guys do that get hired to do this show. It's very controlled. We're going here to here to here, and it's fine.
Well, and again,
I like a little spontaneity.
I admit that it can work. It just doesn't always work. And again, and I can do it for a little while, but I can't. What I'm trying to figure out is not how to do it for 45 minutes. But how to do it for 8. What we're trying to do is get to a point we have to have something. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon, and the goal is to be able to run for 8 hours straight. And to do that, you kind of have to have zones of teams. Otherwise, we can't ever get. We haven't done that yet, but that's the goal: is to get to a point where there's 8 hours of coverage every day, and and that 8 hours is densely, and the panels are changing, and the camera teams are changing, and you got to think about how we want to think about how that, because I don't feel like we serve the audience until we're doing 8 hours a day, and we got to do it in a way that it doesn't kill the engineering team. It doesn't kill the panel. It doesn't kill the ground teams, but in 8 hours a day for 4 days, we're still only going to scratch 10% at best of all the booths we could have shown, and so we want to figure out how do we keep on building that density. People don't have to watch it all at one time, but I think that's where I want to get to, is that we're really having you feel like if you didn't make it, you had a great experience. And that what we found is a lot of people who watch the live event really want to go at some point. It doesn't depress people's wanting to go to the actual event. It's just that if they can't make it, especially if they're another continent or really far away, there's time, money, passports, all those things, that we want to give them this great experience. They get excited that the event's happening,
Yeah, one of the things that we did on the Ivy cart was we added a second little Insta360 Link. You see it on the table there, and we allowed remote viewers to control that camera. So the camera on the Insta360 Link is pretty high quality. It just doesn't have a whole lot of reach. So having something like an FR7 where people can remotely control it, and look at how relaxed Keenan is just hanging out there. There's no weight on his shoulder. Well, he's got a backpack, but you know, all the weight of that big battery that's down below, the modems, the camera, the sound. There's a handheld. You could see the gentleman holding onto it there. The lighting, it's all done. You know, so talking about a fallback position, something like this, it doesn't have to be the exact same, but all the components are there: camera, lighting, audio, internet transmission. So it's something to think about. I mean, I love the cinematic quality, but why not throw the cinematic quality through a PTZ multiples, you know? So then if we do got to focus, get blocked, but now you have some kind of tank where you have a telescopic, you know, arm. I know Jeff Keithley's probably shouting a Jito, which is a little robot RC car looking thing that is about the size of a person, but that thing's like 10 grand. Well, he says that he could get one loaned to us.
Yeah, I know that you always have to wrestle with getting the content versus, you know, wanting to have great content, like great looking and sounding content. And I think that you know, I have a hard time. I have to admit that my view time on webcams is very low. Like if someone, like if I have something that like I don't, and I think other people are able to watch through it. I'm just not. You know, I work in cinema all day, so I'm used to, like, if I see some macro blocking or if I see something break up, it gets to do that 2 or 3 times, and then I move on to something else. You know, like, and so that's what I'm always sensitive to, is that's how I'm always, you're always sensitive to what you do, and I just go, and I'll immediately tune out. And so that's the, you know, and so that's the, and I think my challenge in my head is that we spend so much time talking about video and audio quality that I feel like if I have stuff that's breaking up or not looking like a lot of what we do, it's hard to have that conversation. So that's another thing that kind of,
it is tricky, especially as you said, like with NAB, because the hardest thing is getting the signal out. It's as you said, like the gear is not a problem. We can borrow the gear, we can have our own gear that is quite good. Getting the signal out, it sounds like that's the hardest part. No matter which way we think about it, it's just not easy.
The signal was Zoom sponsored the signal, so we got the signal out. It was really
what I don't mean from the booth that we did last time. I mean like from the floor. So this mobile signal, So I know the live view or the Teradek, like a Prism. That is a good way, because Teradek have their own Teradek data, similar to how live view have their own data planes. But the interesting thing is, like, if we have to hit, like, that's all right if we're loaning the stuff, but if we're trying to do other gigs, like we're not maybe loaned at an IBC or something. So that may be harder if we're trying to do that turnaround where we have to get the data out without, like, literally putting like a Starlink on top of something to get the data out. Because that seems to be the bottleneck at the moment. I think the gear and the audio and the back and forth we've got kind of sorted out.
It's just money.
It's money. I mean, and again, there's plenty of people that there's people who want to sponsor. I mean, I think that there's also limitations of my ability. I'm not very good at writing sponsorship packages. And so that's probably something that limits us a little bit, because we've had people talk to us about it. And so it's just, and we may be able to turn that on pretty quickly. And I think that right now, I know that, you know, my attention is limited because of the activation I'm working on right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's an hour of discussion. I think we Brody just made a good point about the perspective. Let me just read it, because he obviously took time to write it out. The novelty and variety of perspectives the live panel brought to NAB booth visits definitely added value, but I think it would have been very choppy without a skilled host on site, providing glue for transitions, keeping momentum, providing direction, prompting the panel for questions, and repeating panel questions that were hard to hear. So without going into this a long way as well, I do think that person is an advocate for the panel. It's like a bridge between, and so there is still that role of the man on the ground that is able to go in between. And then there was times the guy, I think you did it, was that IBC? No, what was that? IBC? whatever that one was.
Infocom,
That
CES, or
Infocom.
NAB, or
No,
Cinegear. I've
So
done
yeah,
before.
that's right, all of those. No, it was Infocom, and where you did a bunch of stuff, and then you'd say, "Hey, I've got like 50 of my friends that are just hanging out in Zoom here. Can you talk to them?"
That's how you can just get right in front. I mean, people pay attention because it's talk to 2 people at a time for what, 4 hours, or you could talk to 50 at one time. So it really grabs your attention, because I've done booth duty, and you stand on your feet for 4 days for 8 hours a day. If you get to talk to 50 people, that just shortcuts your work. You're amplifying your message.
And we used to brutally do that when we had the live view with Pixel Core. We had a chase producer that was in front of me, and I would be walking through there, and she would just go up to the booth and go, see that camera over there? There's 250 people watching that right now, which is about what we were getting at the time. It was like, there's 250 people watching that right now, and they're going to come here in 5 minutes. And if you have somebody here, you just got to let me know that someone's here willing to stand here and wait for them to show up, and they'll come right to you, and they'll bring 250 people there to ask you questions. And it solved it. Like it was not a problem. And there was just somebody ahead of them, someone ahead of me, who's a really good producer too. Liana was really, like, she's very forceful, and she can scare scare you about how this is all going to go. Like, you're going to miss out if you don't sort this out. And if it wasn't, I'd go there, and she would just, I'd start walking towards, I remember I was walking towards Canon, and she just went like this, and I just went to the next booth. Like, I just, and you could see the Canon person run over afterwards, but I was already on to the next one. And she just gave me the, nope, we're not gonna, they're not here, and so I just kept moving, but it can be done. I think part of my obsession with doing, I will admit that part of my obsession with having the panel be built up and be able to do this on its own is I don't want to go to any of these shows. Like, I want to be the panel. I want to be in the panel. Like, I don't want to be on the ground. Like, and I really want to figure out a way that I get to do what Grant does, or I get to do it with Grant, and we get to sit there and ask questions. And I think that because I don't, as I have a lot of travel in front of me over the next year, and I don't want to add more to do these things. I don't find it, I don't enjoy it anymore.
Fair enough. What a great note to leave it on. to be like, I don't want to travel. I have to, but I don't want to. So,
and we should understand that, we should also, like, as we start to build these things up and we think virtually, we just need to, I know that COVID's in the past, but, we just need to know, we need to keep building these skills and keep knowing what we're going to do if it came back. And I don't mean it's COVID. California just did a state of emergency over R, N or whatever, R N5R1. Is that right? I was warned about that 3 years ago during COVID by somebody who works on this kind of stuff. And they're like, if that gets to the surface, he said it's the same as COVID, except that the lethality is 30 times higher. Like, and we are one mutation away from February being a return back to where we were before, but in a way worse way. So we just have to know that, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that, like, we need to keep on building these technologies and keep on building the lifeboats that we have here of being able to talk in, because that kind of thing can happen again quickly. And it's not, when I say it's not, like, it's a non-zero chance that gets to human in the next year. And if that happens, we're all back to square one again. So we just have to remember that that's the case.
Yeah, H5N1.
H5. I'm sorry, I've been a little sick. So it's like H5N1, but H5N1 it's right in the rest of the world.
Irony? I think it's irony that you couldn't remember what it was because you're feeling sick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the reason I was thinking about it was I was like, it's in Northern California. There's been some cases, and so I was like, oh, I should have gotten tested because I had the flu, and maybe and but the lethality of that is like 50%. Like, it's not like not a minor incursion. So I think that we just have to remember that all of these tools, whatever we're doing with these events and however we're doing it with communication and building meetings, we should not think that COVID will take another 100 years or something like it will take 100 years to come back.
Yeah, well, there's a precedent set now, right? With what how the countries responded and how the whole world responded, and so it's more likely that it's
Right.
just, it's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
So that's a
Stock up on
sober
TP
thought.
now.
That's right. That'll be interesting. It'll be interesting though. I mean, if the whole world locks down and we're doing this show, I'll be happy to get up in the middle of the night again, and we'll be ready to roll.
Yeah. I think that the thing I worry about is that the losses will be astronomical if it
Yeah.
happens. Like it will be it's, you know, again, it could be 30 times higher.
Yeah, wow.
Not percent. Like, so it's,
Okay.
so it'll be a brutal time. So we just need to know that we need to keep understanding, you know, remember what we learned, you know, and be ready to respond quickly if it need be. But when you see California doing state of emergency, it's not because they're not worried.
Yep. Fair enough. So a little bit of housekeeping here. So I suggested a whole nother topic at the start that we won't get to now, but it is a perfect topic for next week, which is it will be the last one for the year. And so we can talk about those things then. Generally, the way that we work this show, Extra Hours, is that we leave the questions open for the first hour, and then we generally take the next sort of half an hour to finish those off. And so that's what we'll do. We've got a few questions there that we'll get to now, and then we'll better look at some of those other things next week. I'm also interested, David, to hear have a think about your show and where you're at and what episode 10 is going to look like too. So hold on to that thought. Let's do a couple of questions and then we'll come to that. So Guy, what's next?
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, California asks, what criteria do you use when prioritizing future improvements in office hours / extra hours?
Carl?
So for me, my setup is not permanent. So I set up every time I come into the show, I set up. So for me, it's been figuring out how to set up with the minimum amount of resistance, still keep the quality, or improve the quality. But yeah, so pretty much I have the equipment, I have the space, I have the lighting, you know, I have all that kind of stuff, but have the internet connection. So it's not really a problem of equipment or space or anything. It's more about me setting up and packing down for every show. So for me, that's actually, it's more about my labor cost going down each time I do this. And I've pretty much gotten it down quite a short period of time now where I can set up and be ready for the show.
Fair enough. Alex?
For my own personal kit, I do everything I can not to change anything. So it's as permanent as possible. All my meetings, everything else are all just, this is what this looks like. And I don't want to move anything. From a larger office hours, extra hours, we actually haven't changed our goals for a long time. We're just slowly getting our way towards them, you know, and we make some adjustments here and there, you know, like, so the long-term goal is that super high quality that we've talked about this for 5 years. The super high quality of, I mean, not quite 5 years, but three or 4 years. This conversation that we have that is working, that is an interaction between the producers and the panelists and, you know, those types of things, super high quality audio and video that kind of set the pace for other people to look at and to understand, and all in the cloud. All these pieces are coming together, but what you're seeing is, so the top of the mountain's the same place that it has been for years. The methodologies that we use to get there keep on adjusting because we hit a tree or we hit a cliff or there's a river here or there's a whatever, and we kind of move around it. You know, I think that, you know, we looked at, you know, second hours was something that we removed from the system because it was slowing down the technological advances that we had, and it wasn't sustaining itself very well. So it wasn't, oh, we have to do the tech stuff, we have to get rid of something that's totally healthy. It wasn't filling itself very well. And so it was a little bit, you know, that part wasn't working 100%. And we had some other needs to move to, well, let's get that tech working. This evening show is a great conversation. It's an experiment with a much different format, but it's also us building the cloud capacity. So, you know, so we're slowly building up, like, how do we, and then the hardware that we use every morning is, is pushing the outer edge. Like, what is the furthest out we can take the quality of this conversation and where we're going, and shows and everything else. And then David is doing, I'm sure he'll talk about it, but he's using Ecamm, so it's a whole different way of doing a show. I'm using, for the fireside chats, which have been a little offline, but we'll come back in as we go into next year, I'm using Mimo Live for that. And then we're looking at using Carbonite Code for some of the other stuff that we're doing, possibly the specials, if it, as another experiment. And then we have vMix being used on Saturday mornings for some of the tests there, for both doing a vertical and horizontal version of the show. We have on Sundays, we're using the Zoom production studio, which is the backup to the backup to the backup of everything goes wrong. We still can build up a show pretty quickly anywhere. And then in addition to that, we just partnered with Opus. And so you're going to see more shorts coming out as we start to figure out how to chunk that stuff up. So there's, as far as how do we, there's a lot that we're kind of moving towards. I think that, we know that we want to add more VOD content. It's just a matter of figuring out the how and when and what that looks like. That's a heavier lift in a lot of ways than some of the stuff we do now. It's funny. It's not. This is harder in many ways. If you talk to someone, doing live is hard, but we know how to do it. So we've gotten good at that part. But the VOD stuff, I think just takes a lot more thinking to get it right. So anyway, so those are the things but I think that we've talked about where we've been going for a long time. And I don't think we've changed much towards the end target, but you're constantly seeing us adjust to the reality of the situation.
Alex, you talked about your particular setup. I want to know about your microphone selection, because I'm missing, you obviously sound a little bit different today, but I'm missing the ties. I'm missing the highs that we used to get from the Neumann.
I think I think it's also the
Physical
proximity. So if I like open this up a little bit more, you might hear some more of the highs. I think I'm a little too close to this mic. Sometimes I just kind of lean into it. The other mic, the Neumann is, and the Stellar X2 is also a real challenge in my room, so, and I've got a couple things that have more fans right now, because the Ubiquity makes little turns on every once in a while as it, it kind of comes up, and I could hear it in the mics. And then the, and I'm testing this one mostly because I use it for Michael Krasny's show. Michael Krasny definitely sounds better on this than he did and it was just a function of how he talks and his proximity and everything else. This one was more forgiving for that. And so, but part of it is me learning what it should or shouldn't, where it should or shouldn't sit, so yeah. And, it's funny because and Leo gives me less trouble with this mic than he did not like the Neumann. And I got to hear about it in pre-show like every week.
Every time.
Yeah, he hated it.
What did he say? That it was too.
He thought it was too boomy. He thought it was too boomy, and he thought that it was. He thought this one sounded better. Like he likes this one better than the other one.
What does Leo know?
Yeah, exactly.
What sort of
so there was it was like this. I think that it was like an assault on me every single time every week, and I finally just was like,
getting paid.
Mic in, and yeah, I'm just gonna. And I'm thinking about. I am thinking about having other mics and switching mics more often. I did. This one's metal. Like it's hard to change the Neumann. The problem is that, and it sounds stupid, but and JJ gave me one that I need to test. I need to use. I feel bad because he gave it to me a long time ago, and I don't use it because taking the Neumann off and on was really a pain because it's got a plastic mic ring. I know it sounds like a minor thing, but it like is really painful. That little plastic mic ring. Do you have the little quick release?
Oh no.
Yeah, I had a quick release that I put on this, but then it's too much on this arm, and even when I tighten it, it doesn't work. So there's a bunch of little weird things. Now that I've gone to this, I could switch over to his mic and play with that as well. I've also thought about, just having an EV20 as a test. I have a Heil like what Guy has. So I've got different mics that maybe I should use more often and play around, and people can tell me what they think. The SM7B, when it comes to doing podcasts, you get the least number of comments. Like, as it's what everybody uses, you know,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
you know,
Just the
there's
de
a little bit
facto
of a,
mic.
there's a little bit of if you show up with an SM7B, no one's asking you any questions about what you're doing, you know, and that
Mhm.
there's a little bit of that too. It just makes it easier. And mostly the reason that's what we got it for the road. This is a road part of the road rig. I have a 1510 in my backpack, and I can show up and do a podcast with two people at a pretty high quality with arms and, you know, records and my Scorpio and, you know, all the other stuff. And I can set it all up in about 15 minutes for someone to come in, for Michael Krasny. We did it with Malcolm Gladwell and a couple others. And so, but so I built that, and I didn't want, a lot of these folks are on podcasts all the time. And so I just wanted two mics that when they walk in, they go, oh yeah, okay, I got it. You know, like in that, you know, and that makes it easier, especially when you're doing high profile interviews. So
Very good. All right. Next question.
Matt Large in Tunbridge Wells, UK asks, is the upcoming immersive camera from BMD the first lens they've shipped? Do we know if they worked with someone else on that component?
Carl?
So we can look to the past. Blackmagic is part of the Amount Alliance. Well, they were. I don't know if they still are, but they do have one lens that's actually, I showed it early in the show. So that's this lens. So this is a Blackmagic lens. It was made for them by Fujinon. In certain markets, so depending on what market you're in, you can buy it separately. So this is it, $4,000. So you can buy it separately if you want to put it onto another B4. It's just a standard B4 mount, but it was made for Blackmagic. It was made for the Ursa G2 broadcast. So, but yeah, so this is the one lens that has been made for them by Fujinon. We don't know who made the lenses yet for the immersive camera. I'm sure once that camera actually starts shipping, Blackmagic will be happy to share who their lens partner was. I'd be no surprise if it was Fujinon, seeing as they've worked with in the past, and Fujinon have, you know, they have the skill to actually make that lens. I can't see them ever changing. That's going to be a fixed lens, obviously, because it's 180. There's no need to change that lens on that camera, of course. So there's not going to be other further lenses for that camera. But it is interesting. There's always been this talk in the past that they may actually go into making their own lenses or partner with someone to make their own lenses. The Fujinon B4 lens is the only one so far, and obviously this immersive lens. So this stereo 180 will be the second lens that they've shipped with the camera.
Alex?
yeah, I think that I think this might be the first lens. This is the first time they've shipped a lens with it, and part of that is the registration that's required is so tight to make this work that it's a very complicated problem. I don't know who's making the lens. I agree with Carl. It's probably not going to be interchangeable. So it's going to be what it is. And a lot of us are pretty excited. I've got some friends that are already on the wait list for it. I was talking to someone this morning who's already booked 2 gigs with it, and you know, later in the summer and the fall, they've already got 2 gigs, you know, already booked to shoot with it. So it's and again, it's going to be a specialty item, but we've never seen a camera solve this problem before. Like it's all in one, turn it on, and it works. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting when it comes out.
Yeah, I got a friend of mine that I follow works for Blackmagic, and they just did a staff event at a big lookout, this beautiful vista in Victoria, and I was just reading between the lines, thinking surely they're running around with the immersive camera, getting some, you know, big, you know, amazing shots and stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing the sort of content that they might put out. It's interesting to see that, I mean, they're not a content company, right? But they want to show off what the camera can do, and I'm just interested to see.
Well, what's interesting is that a lot of the stuff that they've shot as samples in the past would be great with this, like the cooking thing that they've used for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I think their 8K cooking sample or whatever, cooking stuff like that is going to be anything that has a lot of action 5 to 20 feet out is where you're going to see all the, you know, real. And, you know, I think that some bands and, you know, different kinds of art, I think that there's also some stage stuff that could be really interesting. That, you know, that you're telling us, you know, instead of sitting where the audience is, imagine being in the perfect place for a stage play for each scene. Like you just sit there and, you know, but you're able to see it from that position. I think it could be, we've done some tests in the past with Ozos that way, and super compelling. So I think that there's going to be a lot of, and again, there's been a lot of creativity that just got killed because the logistics were so heavy. Like that's the thing that, when you get the logistics out of the way, a lot of creativity starts to sprout out of, I always joke that when you buy food at the supermarket, and I buy a lot of stuff at farmers markets, but when you buy food at the supermarket, you're not paying for food, you're paying for logistics. You're not buying food, you're buying logistics, like all the stuff they had to put into it and when they picked it and all the other stuff, how shelf life and everything else. So most of the ingredients and most of what you pay for is logistics, and so in when we're doing filmmaking, so much of it is logistics that keep you from doing those things. So when you get that out of the way, either with money or with simplicity, you end up with a whole new layer of things that people can do. And so I think I'm pretty excited about to see when this gets that piece of logistics out, which is that every camera before this has been an art project, including the ones Apple's shot, the stuff you've seen. Those are like engineering art projects. When that goes away and you can rent this for $1,500 a day, you'll see a lot of content. It's pretty cool.
It's going to be exciting. In January sometime, I want to do another Vision Pro episode of Extra Hours where we just, all the panelists are not, we don't need to, last time we did it, we were showing the avatars. It's not necessarily about that. I just want to have people that are playing around with the AVP and be talking a bit about that. So we'll get Marcelo back on and see what he's up to with Stream Voodoo. That'll be very fun. So watch out for January sometime. One of these nights we'll have a Vision Pro panel. All right, next question.
Ian Morrish in Wellington, New Zealand asks, I want to use a Bluetooth headset with some analog equipment. What is a good Bluetooth adapter that handles transmit and receive and provides analog microphone and headphone connectors? Could also be built into a USB audio device so long as it can be ...
Carl?
So there is kind of this Swiss Army knife. I think everyone on this panel should just buy 2 of them. So what it is, it's Hoser. So it's a pretty simple device. It's relatively small. It looks like the size of an Apple TV. It's actually much smaller. It's about a quarter the size of an Apple TV. So what you've got, it says auxiliary in, auxiliary out. So this is line in, line out, 3.5. It's powered via USB. But you'll notice there's a switch, transmit and receive. And there's a power button. That's it. So it's a pretty straightforward device. So it can either be transmitter or receiver. You simply buy 2 of them, and you can convert any line level signal to Bluetooth. It can receive it and then convert it back to line level. So the harder thing about this is transmit. So a lot of things can receive Bluetooth, but if you think about what transmits, only computers, only what we call hosts can transmit. So this can actually act as a host and transmit Bluetooth, where it's usually a phone, a computer. Those kind of devices are the ones that have to actually transmit Bluetooth in the first place. But this is a standalone product. As I said, it's about quarter the size of an Apple TV, $45. Buy 2 of them. It'll save your life for a lot of little things where you just need to get a signal, 10 meters, or you just need to transmit Bluetooth and you don't want to use a phone. You don't want to use a computer, which means you have to get that signal into a computer and get it back out. So a good example for this would be you want to use Bluetooth headphones with your A10 Mini. So you've got an A10 Mini Extreme. It's got headphone out. Plug the headphone into this. You can use Bluetooth headphones to monitor your A10 Mini. Done. So there's lots and lots of cases just like that this will work in. Just buy 2 of them and you'll think of ideas. You go, I can actually do that. I can do that. It's a transmit side that's quite amazing because the Flow 8 can receive Bluetooth, which is pretty cool, but the Flow 8 cannot transmit Bluetooth. So this device, the fact you can switch it, so you can have 2 receivers, you can have it as 2 receivers, you can have it as 2 transmitters, and you can transmit to a Rode Go and a Flow 8. So these are the kind of things where that particular product's really good. $45. Put 2 of them in your Christmas stocking. Done.
Alex?
Yeah, in a lot of productions, we have a tendency to use JK Audio for a lot of the stuff. So these are there's a wide variety. This is adapter 3. This is a Bluetooth, but they've got lots of things. One of the ones that let's see, I was looking at another one in Blue Set. Like for instance, this plugs into your your blue, whether it's Clearcom or any of the other ones, you can just plug this into where your headset would go and it just makes a Bluetooth connection back. So so for us, and you get into these, I mean, a lot of us use we got into this using Innkeepers. Innkeepers are kind of how we did hybrids for phones for a long time, so we get to know JK Audio. But one of the things they're known for in production is producing all of these Bluetooth. Let's see, I guess they have a whole broad category here. This is all their Bluetooth enabled. A couple of them here. I don't know. There's more of them that they have, but they have a lot of Bluetooth enabled systems for that as well. And then if you aren't trying to do analog, I use the Audinate Bluetooth adapter that is PoE and puts your Bluetooth onto the network. So then you can have your phone attached to that, your phone attached to the Bluetooth, and it just treats a Dante signal as the headphone and receiver, or the headphone and mic. And so now you can have a real mic and your everything else in your system, your Dante system, and you're feeding it back. And why would you want to do that? Because Clubhouse only let you use your Bluetooth connection. They wouldn't let you have an analog connection into your phone to trying to keep everybody even. And I was like, well, I want to use my mic. And so that's another way that you can kind of tie all that stuff together.
Very good. The thing that I've seen around the place is these Airflies. This is a bit more of a consumer version of what we're talking about, and so it's just a little transmitter, and so transmits to Bluetooth, away it goes. And so now they've got this Pro version, which is just like what Carl was talking about. It's reversible, so now it can be a receiver as well. It's kind of cool. This Pro version, listening to allows people to listen to the same audio wirelessly. So that's interesting. Sometimes the two devices are one or the other. They can both be connected sort of on standby, but this is actually actively together. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then this was the idea where it could be a receiver and send it into an aux. So I think it's probably the pricing's not too bad on it. I think you see there, yeah, $65 US. So anyway, there's a couple of options, but I noted that you talked about having microphone as well, and I'm pretty sure none of these do that. So that might be a bit trickier. The other thing is to go Dante, which is a sledgehammer to this task. But there is the Avio's Bluetooth adapter that does do audio both ways, bidirectional. Is what I'm trying to say. And so that could work for you in certain circumstances as well. So, all right, next question.
Next one's coming in from Carmi in Redondo Beach, and he asks, two-part question. Other than PD Movie and DJI LiDAR, are there any other LiDAR-based autofocus systems for cinema lenses / cameras that anyone has used, and which are the best that people recommend?
Carl?
So Panavision has Panatape, probably the oldest version of this. Now, the reason is, why do you want autofocus on a cinema camera? That's one question. Because that's the only one place where you don't want the camera to start thinking of for itself. Documentary, yes. But realistically, if you want a camera that has autofocus, has really good autofocus, has tracking, which LiDAR won't have the best tracking, because it has to really know a subject. Now DJI has a little bit of smarts in theirs, but it's just LiDAR. It's like maybe 30,000 points. My suggestion would always be the C700. So there's a full frame version, there's a Super 35 version, there's a global shutter version. This is $35,000 camera. It has dual pixel autofocus, and Canon, of course, has cine servos. So they have cinema lenses that have autofocus. This has autofocus. It has dual pixel autofocus. So it's one of the best autofocus you can get. So if you're looking at that kind of documentary run and gun, this is it. Of course, you can get the C500, C300. They all have this. But if you want true cinema with all the features that you get with cinema camera, just go to a rental house, and you can, as I said, you can get the global shutter version. There ain't no global shutter version from any other manufacturer. So this is the only one that has global shutter outside of Sony's DSLR or mirrorless camera. But this is well known in the industry. The C700 is well rented. It's one of the most rented cameras from rental houses outside of the ARRI system. But that's because it has features that ARRI just doesn't have. There's very little overlap as far as the autofocus features with that particular camera. And as I said, you got your C400, C300 Mark III. You have your newer cameras, of course. Excellent for documentary, excellent for indie films. But yeah, the C700 is if you want autofocus and cine lenses, that's your combo.
Right. Alex?
Yeah, the DJI one has been probably, if we're not using someone doing it by hand, has been the one that we've tested, and I haven't used it that much in production for exactly what Carl said. It was like once I put a cine lens on it, I oftentimes have an operator that knows how to run that lens. I will say that a really good autofocus system, especially with interviews, sometimes is a little bit better. I will admit, it wasn't this way 5 years ago, but the autofocus systems have gotten so smooth. If you look at like what I'm doing here, and then I come back to here, and I lean in a little bit, and I lean out a little bit, and when we're doing interviews, the other problem that we end up with is we just don't want the person getting interviewed to see any movement. So a lot of times we're trying to get away from the camera or not have anybody move, like when they're and so we're pretty careful about when we do interviews. Almost all of our interviews are in Teratron, so they're almost always looking at I don't like this anymore. Like I don't like I've kind of gotten past that. Like, so people looking off camera for an interview is kind of like, to me, old media. Like when Grant was talking about it, I feel like that's just old media. I want to just see them talking. And this weird thing that people do when I'm interviewing you through Zoom, so I'm going to shoot over the laptop for a second to tell you that I did this over Zoom. I'm kind of like, okay, you don't need to do that. So anyway, so I just like the Teratron, but a lot of times when we do that, we do be all like almost like a little cove around it, so that the only thing that person can see, even no matter what my crew looks like, the only thing that person sees is that the person that they're talking to, because you'd be surprised at how quickly anything happens and their eye darts off. And I have a perfectly good interview that just got like a perfectly good point that someone was making, that they either had a hiccup in what they were saying or they looked over for a second, and it takes away from the value of it. And so that's why when we do autofocus, it's one of the reasons I like using Sony's for some of this stuff now, is because we don't have to worry about it. Like it's going to grab onto their face. It's just going to stay there. And that becomes useful and again, it's one of the reasons we've moved to PTZs as well for a lot of this stuff, is because less people that are distracting. It's not about a head count. It's just less people distracting the talent from talking to each other and talking to the cameras.
Good one. Next question.
Next one's in from Talalik Lopez Waterman in Norfolk, Virginia, and he asks, what is the best equation to think about what it costs to build a show in the cloud? Participant X show, duration X, the redundancy, or some other way?
Alex?
The best way is generally with any show, is to try to get all the details, and then back into like, how long is it going to take me? And this is what it's, a lot of times when I build the bid, I'm building the show. Like I'm building the show of like, I'm asking all the questions of what is it going to look like, and how is it going to go, and I'm figuring it all out. And that's for a physical show and I don't do as many where we're building everything into the cloud. Grant might have a better solution for this. In the cloud, I don't think we've gotten, for the stuff we've done in the cloud, I don't think anything's cost us more than $50 an hour. Now that doesn't count the setup time, but when we think about the cloud time, I just go, well, it's 50 or sometimes I say $100 an hour for the cloud. Just running it, because I want a bigger container than what it costs. I can always go back and say, hey, it didn't cost as much as we thought it would, but I can't go back and ask for more money typically. So I, tend to say that cloud instances, all those cloud instances are way more expensive than they might be out of the gate. Now, if people are watching that are my clients, I'm like, we put it somewhere else. We talked about it. So anyway, but I tend to create a safety net. My big thing is always making sure I don't come back to clients asking for more money. Like that's the thing I do everything I can do to avoid. As far as the setup goes, I just try to figure out how long is it going to take me to set up, and how long. There's no math to it, because almost every one of the shows that I do is different than the last one. Like we're building them all differently. And that $100 an hour, $50 an hour is usually a very small number in the overall cost of building the show. All the prep and graphics and support people and all that other stuff, that's like 10% of the cost of the show. So anyway, so I don't know what the math is other than to ask lots of questions and try to build the entire show and then put an hourly against everything that's there. I don't have a fast way to do it. People often want you to give them a number like that. like, hey, just how much would this cost? How much would clients call us all the time? Like, you got to tell me right now, how much would this cost? And I'm like, I can't. Until I sit down in front of my spreadsheet, I cannot tell you how much this is going to cost. Or if they do, I multiply it by like 8. Like I just don't, like, whatever pops into my head, like, it's much, I'm just going to say a much bigger number. And sometimes people have just said yes. I had one where someone did that to me, and they called and I'm going to a meeting. I've got 10 minutes. I need you to tell me how much this is going to cost. And they explained what it is. And I was like, I can't tell you that quickly. And they said, you just got to give me a number. I'll get, and I'll come back and tell you whether we have to go up or down. And I said, okay, it's $500,000. And they hung up, and they called me back 30 minutes later and said, okay, we're on. I'm just like, okay, let's figure it out. Turned out it was not a bad quote. I mean, it was pretty more accurate than
pretty close. Yeah.
Here's the worst part.
Unfortunately,
I thought it was great, and I thought I had lots of money. And by the end, I didn't lose money. like that was all it turned out. It was a crazy job. So,
yeah, I mean, I think your formula there sounds pretty good. Participants times show duration times redundancy, because I think that they are the key things that you're thinking about. It's the one thing that it might be a fallacy, but I feel like the thing that I never feel when I'm using a bunch of the gear in this room, I never feel like, oh, this is all costing me, even though it's, drawing power or whatever. I don't think it's costing. Whereas no matter if I'm all the cloud infrastructure, if it's a couple of bucks an hour, or if it's $50 an hour, whatever it is, it feels like it's a limited resource, or it's a resource that's it's just constantly costing, and it just adds a level of anxiety, I think, when doing these shows, which is why it's one of the things, Guy, when we're working on these shows together, and I was like, as soon as I could just say that's a fixed cost, I loved it. Like, as soon as I could go to Tucker and Jonas and just go, I want a fixed cost for doing the shows, then I didn't worry about it. And I knew that when I said what my start time was, that they were calculating that their start time was an hour or 2 hours before that, or whatever, to get before I was starting my minus 4 hour pre-show, that type of thing. But I wasn't calculating, all the instances that we're running in all of that. But Guy, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say the labor, that's a huge part of the equation. The cloud part, the spin up of the instances is insignificant compared to your EIC. If you have a backup plan for engineering to fail over, if you have a backup engineer, if you have a backup TD. So it just depends on how deep you want to go, because as Grant was saying on that show that we were working on, we had 4 or 5 people on that show, a director in Thailand. And I mean, so I was getting calls over, I just had one of those shocks on, and he would say, yeah, give me a 2-up, and a 2-up, and it was seamless all the way from Thailand. So, but he's in a different part of the world, and he's getting up at a different time, but we're spinning up instances 3 hours, 4 hours before the director has to even appear on site in the green room, because we would still be in a Zoom green room, so you would show up on site. So yeah, the instance cost is pretty insignificant. You could actually figure that out off of one show, or off of doing the AWS bandwidth cost. So like a G4DN 4X is like $2. And if you want, let's say 3 of those, a contribution, an encoding, and a cutting machine, that's 3. So $6 an hour there. And then your egress cost. Do you want it to go out in 2K or 4K? And is it going to multiple places? Because you don't pay for bandwidth coming in, and especially if you're using Zoom, it's so lightweight. But if you're using something like NDI Bridge, you are going to have fatter pipes coming in. So what does that cost for you to bring stuff in? It should be free. I mean, it should be so ingress to AWS is absolutely free, but you might have some costs elsewhere if you're using live views or something like that from the field, where your cellular all of a sudden is costing you an arm and a leg to get that stuff from point A to point B. But yeah, some things to think about.
Yeah, Alex?
Yeah, I wanted to underline something that you said about being stressed until you had just a solid number. And it's so important when you think about quoting for clients, of the more you can just give them, this is how much it's going to cost, to do it. And then we'll figure out all the math underneath it. I think there's always a temptation, especially in Hollywood, there's always a temptation to like underbid and then just nickel and dime people all the way up, because you didn't leave any room. to do anything else, right? And I, with Pixel Core and with 090, I often, when I'm quoting on jobs, I really am trying to we want to make it cost effective, but I also want to make sure I give you a number that you could work with, like that. And what usually happens is, we bid a little heavier than other people, and what usually happens is people keep on making changes, and it just gets up there until you hit that ceiling that I've made a bunch of changes that I haven't, until you hit that ceiling, I'm not going to change anything. Like, I'm just going to keep on going. Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. And if we can find a way to do it for less, or if I can do it instead of hiring somebody or someone else like that, we try to make that all work, because it just makes it so much simpler for a corporate client, especially. But people, I think, underestimate the power of not having itemized like additions. Like, change orders create so much stress, and then they create lots of bad decisions, because people don't want to go through the process of change ordering. They don't want to go to their superior and ask for more money.
Yeah.
And so then they just don't do something in the event, and a lot of times, with Pixel Core, I think I've talked about this many times, but I would bring extra cameras, extra switchers. I could do a whole nother set oftentimes with the stuff that was sitting around. And I would add it because I thought it would look better. Or if they said, hey, what about if we just stand up over here? I'd be like, yeah, sure, we can pull that off. How much is it going to cost? I'm like, oh, we got it. It's no problem. Man, that's pretty addicting. Like when you just kind of solve those things. And that's one of the power. I mean, to go back to Blackmagic, I couldn't have done any of that without Blackmagic, because I was able to buy everything. I couldn't buy all these other camera systems and, Panasonic or Grass Valley or, any of these other ones, when I'm paying what I paid for Blackmagic switchers and Blackmagic cameras and Blackmagic routers, then I was able to own all that stuff. And that means that I can show up with extra gear and I'm not paying rental on it,
with spares as well, right?
Yeah, not many production trucks have two whole systems running in it. Like there's the primary and the backup. In my trailer, there was an entire, two entire systems were built in, and we could switch over at will. And that was, you can't do that with a big truck.
That's cool. Last question.
Last one's coming in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, California. And he asks, what Lav wireless system under $1,000 would you recommend as an upgrade from a 2.4 gigahertz system?
David.
I'm a fan of Shure's QLXD systems. The QLXD, as I understand it, is sort of the second highest. The ULXD is the highest. But I used a couple of their cheaper ones, came in around $500 for years. I had one for actually a headset mic and one for a guitar pickup. And they were great, but they just weren't nearly as reliable as getting something higher end like the QLXD. So I'm a big fan of these.
Good one. Guy?
Yeah, you're gonna need a little bit more money. So you could buy used, but the lowest priced electro that you're gonna get into is the LMB and the LR, and that's about $3,000 a channel. So if you want my honest opinion, that's it. If you want to take a little bit of a risk and hit that budget, remember, you might spend time in post trying to clean stuff up or ADR because you took a hit. But 926, I'm hearing good things about this Deity Theos system. It is 550 to 663 megahertz. It's got 11 reviews, a couple 1-star reviews. So you get what you pay for, or hire a sound guy and let them deal with it.
Yeah. Carl?
So I'm going to go with something. I think the Deity may actually record on device as well, but I'm going to go something that records on device. So this is the Godox system. This is a UHF system. So they have an XLR, they have body packs, they have the mic itself. Now, this, you could buy 6 of these for under $1,000. And that's what I'm talking about. So if you need coverage, this is a much better UHF system if you don't need to go too far either. So you want to put your receiver as close as possible and then run the audio. But as far as UHF is good, this is more your lower, this is more your cheaper end, but I wouldn't call it lower. Just don't expect to go more than 10 to 20 meters with the actual wireless. Don't try to go from the front of a theater to the back of a theater. Just go to the lectern, put the receiver at the lectern and run a cable from the lectern. But yeah, but you can get 6 of these for under $1,000. So if you need a lot, and there's 96 channels. So, but yeah, if you don't want to be in the 2.4 and you don't want to break the bank, then this is a system I would suggest stepping up to.
Very good. I'm just scrambling. The ones that I just recently bought was in the Sennheiser range. We got the EWDs, the DX, DX, I think they are EWDX, which is Dante enabled receivers. Now, I'm just thinking that the four, which is really cool because they've got a 4-channel receiver in a single RU. That's a lot more than $1,000. But the two-channel version, we ended up getting two-channel versions because it was actually quite a bit cheaper than buying the 4-channel in the single RU. And the transmitters that we got, we basically just got the entry level because it's just for Q&A mics, right? It's really not, didn't need to be anything too special. But the fact that they're PoE, Dante, and like Ethernet control means that you can throw these receivers wherever you want in a room with a single Cat5 on it, and it's running power.
Now,
and
this is the
Dante
Microflex, or this is not?
No.
It's not,
This is Sennheiser.
oh, Sennheiser. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So let me just bring one up. But we're really happy with them. The only thing is that the transmitters chew through the batteries for some reason, and so I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
These are the EWs.
Yeah, EWDX. Yeah. So let me show you here. So this is the 4-channel rack version, but yeah, it's a nice look at that. And they got redundancy, like secondary Dante, and it's really nice. We've really liked it. So I would have got the 4-channel, but yeah, so this is the 4-channel version. Then there's the 2-channel is still in a half rack, half RU. And so but it's not really fitting in your budget there. But I'm just pulling an Alex on you there. I'm just ignoring.
I was going to say, yeah. There's a lot of. We go a long way with mics, yeah.
Yeah, so look, if you average all the suggestions that the panel gave you, you'll end up in your budget. But as we gave you a few different options there. Very good. So we're going to come to some content recommendations from the panel. But first of all, I just wanted to hear from David your congratulations on your Thursday night show. And I think you've done 9 episodes. Is that right now?
I think so. Or this week is 9. I don't even remember. Something like that.
That's what happens.
It's a blast. We're having a lot of fun. Yeah, this week we're actually going to be talking about health, technology and health, and how technology is affecting our health, both helping and healing, and hurting, excuse me. There was actually a report that just came out about how Tetris, the game Tetris, is being used to support people with PTSD. It's fascinating stuff. So we're going to be talking about health and technology and lots of other good stuff. So it's good. We're having a lot of fun.
That's really cool. Well, Tetris there's that new movie a recent movie about Tetris, which is actually really cool.
I did not think you could make a movie. I was like, how could you make a movie about Tetris? And it's awesome. It's such an amazing movie. Yeah, it's really good.
Enjoyable.
If you I know you didn't think that Tetris could be a thriller. It is. It's really good.
It's a thriller. And you can now get ChatGPT to just write you a Tetris game.
Which I've done,
right?
as I've talked about in the past. I had it write one for me in 15 minutes. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it was done. Very good. All right. Who's going to go first? Alex, who have we got first with a content recommendation?
Yeah, I'm going to say Nate Bargatze. Nate had a Thursday. He had a Christmas special.
Nashville
last
Christmas.
Thursday. The Nashville Christmas, which was great. Like it was. I recorded it on whatever, and he's got his new special coming out tomorrow. So I haven't even seen it, but I've watched so much Nate Bargatze that I'm clear that it'll be great. Like I'm not like I just don't. I don't like. I have can't remember another time. And I know that CK Lewis not CK Lewis. I mixed that up with what is CK? Who's the comedian?
Yeah.
I'm still recovering.
It is. It's CK.
Louis CK.
Oh, Louis CK.
Louis CK.
Yeah, it's like something about that's not
who's
right.
not known for being clean on many levels.
I was going to say you've gone from one extreme to the other.
No, I'm not recommending him.
Comedians.
I just thought it was funny coming from him. He just said Nate Bargatze's the best comedian out there right now. He said he has taken no sides. He never like suck is the thing. He's the must. I'm sorry, I said it on the show because and he apologized when he said it, but that's the roughest word he's ever said. The roughest word I've said on the show. But he said that that's as bad as it gets, and he just makes fun of himself and his family and the stuff, and it's, if you haven't watched Nate Bargatze, I don't know who hasn't watched Nate Bargatze so far, but if I see a short of something he's done that I've seen 5 or 6 times on YouTube, I often will watch it again. Like the delivery is just so perfect. Like and he's just so good at it. And he's he goes anyway. So it's coming out tomorrow. Is the new special, and my family will sit down and definitely watch the next one. So
very good. That's a good one. My next one, Guy.
Yeah, my content pick's going to be a piece of software emanating from a question this morning. There was a question which actually appeared on the show, but also was in a Facebook group about recording and extracting political segments to be able to toss back immediately from a live stream. And we've done this with Nimble, and now there's something very quick that you could do it with from Tools on Air for $99. You can record 8 channels of NDI. So you can grab these and drop these NDI files right into Premiere, Final Cut, or DaVinci growing files. So as they're growing, you can drop them into your timeline and edit them, add titles, and then kick them back out. So $99, I've been playing with it all day. It's amazing. I can't believe it, because this used to be like $1,000 software. Now you can buy it direct for $99, and you can download a free trial of it and try it out. It's so good.
To follow up on your follow-up, I said something this morning. I kind of said it, and people asked me later, and I hadn't given any information about it. The same conversation. If you're on distributed teams and you're trying to do it over the web, I mentioned that Use It is what we're using for clipping. We do clipping as a business. I mean, the 090 does a lot of clipping for some pretty big shows. This is, and almost nobody knows it, except for us. And so this allows us to have a whole team looking at an event live on the web and clipping all those things out in real time and dumping them and so for really big events, let's say boxing events or football events on Christmas or other things like that, it's a pretty cool tool to do those things. It doesn't give you the same control and everything else the guy's talking about, and having it all local. But if you're dealing with a big team that's global that needs to cut something together and needs a web version, it's another option. But the Tools on Air, by the way, such great company, like just really great people, great company, and they build a lot of great tools as well.
Is that an Alex sort of budget that Use It?
I don't know. I'm not the one that does the billing. Do
you know what?
The one that does the billing.
Do you know what? When you look at something like that and it doesn't have the pricing on it, it's in Alex sort of pricing.
I will say it's not as expensive. I know that we made decisions. It's not as expensive as Grabio. Like that was the one that we were looking at, and this was less expensive and more feature rich than Grabio, which is what a lot of people that do this, in the cloud. It's going to be much less expensive to do it. If you're doing it by yourself, it's going to be much less expensive to do what Guy's showing on a piece of hardware. You're going to be pulling those clips. I know that some folks, Brandon Goodyear, who was on our show last week, is doing it in Resolve, being able to just have something pop in and be able to cut things. But I think that, I think that what the Tools on Air version is going to be a great one. It's going to be a lot less expensive to do.
Yeah, I'm running it on a Mac Mini M4 and 8 channels. it just boggles my mind because I have a stack of Key Pros sitting over here, and that's what I've been using, and that's very expensive, and it's a lot of wiring, and it's the workflow is a quad card with 8 SDI cables coming out of the quad card going into 8 decks, and it's a lot of heat and power. And this is one little Mac Mini that's like,
it's awesome,
tiny.
And have you tried the growing file in Final Cut? Final Cut Pro?
Yeah. So the trick there is to don't say copy the file. You got to say leave file in place. So that's the trick to letting it grow. And then you can just keep pulling the end and it'll just keep growing.
Love it. That's really cool. Who's next? What do we got? Must be Carl.
All right. So this week, I know last week I suggested something that was 30 hours long. And a few weeks ago, I suggested something from Lucasfilm that was like 50 hours long. So I thought maybe I'll go something a little bit shorter this time. So my suggestion this time is only 4 hours long. And it's the documentary series made by the BBC. It's really a docu-series, so it's a dramatization of the space race from the birth of rocketry back in Peenemünde. So this is a peninsula off Germany with the German rocket scientists. Technically, they started before the Nazis took over the country. They started in 1930. And then the Nazis kind of looked at them and said, okay, we'll give you some money. And they gave them a lot more money into the 40s. But you get to see all of that in this documentary. That's actually in the first episode. And it goes right through to the German team coming to the USA and the space race starting, really. Essentially, the Germans divide. Half go, well, not half. A lot of them come to the USA. A handful of key people go to the Soviet Union. And off they went. But the Soviet Union really did have their own rocket scientists who kind of led the way.
No spoilers, Carl. No spoilers.
Well, it's enough, but it's only 4 hours. So, and they're really compartmentalized. So it starts in essentially it starts in the 40s and it finishes pretty much in the late 60s, early 70s. But it's really good. It's won a lot of awards. They had to actually build a rocket for this. So one of the rockets they actually built, and now it's in a museum as a replica of an original V2 rocket because a lot of them haven't survived. So there are a few artifacts that this documentary actually has handed out to museums to teach people about the birth of rocketry. But yeah.
And did they use the same studio that Kubrick used for the Apollo mission?
That's right. The one in Nevada. That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, nice. Excellent. Always like I try to get that in every time I'm talking to Carl about anything to do with the space race.
There is a documentary that Kubrick had his wife release after he passed away. Donald Rumsfeld in it. So Kubrick pulled in it's a mockumentary that Kubrick wanted to say about this kind of thing. So he had a mockumentary made. His wife released it after he passed away. Yeah, as I said, as Donald Rumsfeld he was a Secretary of Defense at the time the documentary came out. And it was about him faking it and him being asked to fake it by the US government if things went wrong. Now, he said nothing went wrong, so what you see is real, but here was the plan B. And he said that the lens that they made for Barry Lyndon, which was a 0.7 f lens, the fastest lens used in cinema at the time. So that lens was created, all this kind of stuff. But his wife was a really good sport. She partakes in this and has Kubrick having interviews as well in the past talking about it. So he was very clever to make this mockumentary that he released after he passed away, just to give the world one more middle finger, I guess.
Yeah,
after he left.
Wow. Very good. David, what's your content recommendation?
Of course, it's the rundown every Thursday night at 9 p.m. But so you may know that Mr. Beast has released the Beast games on Amazon Prime. This is not my content recommendation. My content recommendation is actually some of the stuff that's been done about Beast games. So, for example, Colin and Samir, who are well-known YouTubers, they have about a 50-minute video about all of the behind the scenes of how they did this. And this is, by the way, whether you like Mr. Beast or not, this is a huge production. 1,000 cameras, just well over 1,000 cameras, just unbelievable. And then Mr. Who's the Boss does a breakdown of the technology behind the show. This is the scene here that you're looking at. This is Mr. Beast's private viewing room so he can see all the main cameras when they're doing editing. It's really pretty amazing what went into this sort of behind the scenes. So Mr. Who's the Boss does the insane tech behind Mr. Beast's biggest video ever, and then Colin and Samir have the making of Beast games, and those are both, I really enjoyed them.
Very good.
I just have to say, Jimmy is a force of nature. Like he just, he's just an amazing person. Like the imagination that he has around these things, and that is the most beast show. If you haven't seen it, that's out there. I mean, if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. Like
it's crazy.
It's too stressful for me to watch back to back. So like we have to take a week to watch the next one. Like normally you're like, oh, I wish the next one just came out and I'd be able to watch the next Silo or the next whatever. This one's kind of like I need some time to recover from the last one to watch the next one, but it's pretty incredible. It's great recommendation.
Yeah, he's laser focus about just making good videos. What's the best recommendation you can give us or whatever. It's just like,
I couldn't believe it was 40 minutes long. Like it just did not feel like 40 minutes.
Yeah, right.
It just went by so fast, but it was so stressful. It's just so I need a break.
So you mentioned Silo. Ken Jordan said he's enjoying season 2 of Silo. I just haven't got. I'm stuck in the middle of season 1 still, and I just haven't quite. I know I need to just push through a little bit, and then it'll be good.
They've already. If you wonder how Apple feels about Silo, they've already booked seasons 3 and 4. Like they've already paid. They've already bought 3 and 4.
All right, I'll do it. What I did start watching yesterday was Carry On, the Netflix movie. It was really good. I'm halfway through it, but
it's the new. It's the new. What was it? The Bruce Willis.
Die Hard.
That one. Yeah, they're trying to redo
the Christmas
Die Hard.
Film.
Yeah,
I did. I did. I've got my 14-year-old who hasn't watched a lot of those sorts of movies. We did watch Die Hard together. I said it's a Christmas movie, and so that's what we need to watch that together. And so now every now and again we walk past each other, and he goes, "Ho, ho, ho," to me, from the "Now I have a machine gun." Ho, ho, ho.
There was some meme. There was some meme that was out. I usually try to save them, but it was like, baby boomers say that life is life. Everyone's got it too easy now. Like, just buck up. And the millennials are saying that everything's so hard and nothing's working, and they're crying about everything. And then Gen X is Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you. We pushed on a bit longer this time, but that's all right. It's the holiday season. We can go longer. So join us again next week for another exciting episode of Extra Hours, and tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. officehours.global. Ask all your production questions there. Thank you each to the panelists. Thank you to Taylor for spearheading all of the back end and making all that happen. And for 1F Jeff helping out there. They both were busy doing other things, but still managed to get things up and racing for tonight, which is nice. And Robert and Peter that are working in the background too. Really appreciate your work on making this all happen. And of course, everyone that was watching, thanks for your comments and questions. We look forward to chatting again soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.